Hey guys, it's Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Welcome back to the channel. It's another new location. I'm stowing away on a ship in the 18th century. It's kind of what this looks like to me. I'm actually in the laundry room because it's very late at night right now, and it's the only place I can really record without bothering other people in the house. Even though there's nothing exciting behind me, I am sitting at an angle. The reason being, as you can see, if I look straight at you, the glare on my glasses is horrible, so I'm trying to minimize that. We are here today to talk about Armour of God, Jackie Chan, hell yes, the super mega amazing, awesome, incredible edition from 88 Films. If you are new to the channel and you are not subscribed, it would be a huge help if you did subscribe if you're a returning viewer. Thanks so much for coming back. It's good to see you again. If you want to leave a comment about this behemoth right here, do you have it? What do you think about it? How amazing is it? Like, this is legitimately like borderline my new favorite Jackie Chan release. Like, it's just insane how much stuff is on here. If you're unfamiliar, this was put out by 88 Films at the very, very end of 2021. It's a 2-disc set for Jackie's it came out in 1986 in Japan, 1987 in Hong Kong. Classic film, Armour of God. And it's got this hardbound case here. It's got a bunch of stuff on the inside. I'm going to go over all that in a minute. The total running time of what's on here, I calculated it to be about 644 minutes, which is about 10 hours and 45 minutes long. It's just insane. I've watched this movie 5 times in like a week. I've watched so much bonus material. I don't think I could take any more Armour of God. It's killing me. Help me, I'm too weak for the Armour of God. So I'm going to go over the kind of like the physical aspects of the release. I'm going to talk to you about the bonus features. Just very briefly talk about some of my impressions upon revisiting this film. And then I will be out of your hair. Just for those who are unfamiliar, this film was directed by Jackie Chan. And it was originally directed by Eric Tsang. I think it might be pronounced Eric Chang, as people say on the commentary tracks on here. I don't really know. I've always said his name Eric Tsang, so I apologize if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. But he and Jackie kind of developed this concept together where Jackie would be the kind of Asian Indiana Jones, because Eric Tsang was, I guess, really taken with Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, which had been a huge hit in Hong Kong, so a bit of a darker movie, right? And Eric Tsang, if you've seen some of his films, he can do like full-on comedy, but also like pretty dark, violent, serious stuff as well at times. And Jackie had his huge injury on the set of this film, and so there was a big break in filming, and when they went back to make it again, to finish it, whatever you want to call it, Jackie became the director. So that's why that's kind of the story behind it. And I'll talk more about that as I get into my review here, but I'm just going over my notes to see what kind of information I need to tell you. So it stars Jackie Chan, Alan Tam, Rosamund Kwan, Lola Forner, and a bunch of others, but those are really kind of the main stars here. And if you're really unfamiliar with the movie, like if you don't really know anything about it at all, to give you basic plot synopsis, Jackie plays this guy whose name is the Asian Hawk, who is like an Indiana Jones type of, like, he's not really an archaeologist, he's more of like a thief of artifacts. That's probably the best way to put it, who does a lot of cool stunts and is really good at Kung Fu. It's a it's like very 80s movie. And he's stealing like pieces of this mythical set of the Armour of God. And, he gets involved in kind of these two sects of people are trying to collect the full set, and his former girlfriend is kidnapped, and his old friend comes back into the picture, and it's like one of these kind of like international adventures that takes place kind of throughout Europe. And so that's, I mean, the basic idea of what the plot is about. It's a treasure hunter kind of Indiana Jones type thing, and then Jackie's past kind of comes to bear on his present. So to go over the physical release here, the first run comes with this. This is a very hard book, as you can hear me knocking on it, or a case, rather. It's like the case for The Young Master, if you have that release or have seen that release. It comes wrapped in this thing, which I have taken off, but I have inside them. So when you get it, it looks like this. And then I took that thing off, and then you get this amazing, amazing Kung Fu Bob artwork, which I absolutely love. And then you have a poster here, which has Bob's artwork and see Bob's artwork there, and then a poster. I should also forewarn you that this video is going to be long as hell because there are 3 commentary tracks on here and hours worth of bonus material. Then you have this book. And this really is like, this is not a booklet. This is a book. And there's writing in here from, and here we go. So we have Tim Murray, Eastern Heroes. We have Jackie Chan, a trademark designed to succeed by Thorsten Boos, or Boose, or I'm not really sure how to pronounce that, and I apologize if I'm butchering your name if you're watching this. Pixelated Punch, the early video game years of Jackie Chan by Audi Sorley. And Audi Sorley has done commentary tracks for 88 films before, and an interview with Thorsten Nickel, who was in like Thunderbolt, I think, the Jackie Chan film, by Audi Sorley. But I mean, first of all, the essays in here are great, but like the amount of like, so the Eastern Heroes thing is kind of about like the fan culture in the UK and what was going on with like these films being released on VHS and like the Jackie Chan fan club and like you know, like Rick Baker and like that whole kind of scene there. And then a Jackie Chan, a trademark designed to succeed, is really interesting because it talks about like the Jackie Chan stunt team, about the evolution of Jackie and doing stunts, but it also talks about like his production or his equipment rental company and like kind of his evolution as a technician in like the art of filmmaking and stuff like that. There's some really interesting stuff in there that I never really kind of would have thought about before, like in the context of his career and knocking my glasses off. And like I said, it's really late at night. It's already been a day for me, and now I'm doing this. So bear with me here. This might become like, you know, like a Three Stooges thing by the end, which would be appropriate for Jackie Chan, right? Because he loves the Three Stooges. This is really interesting too, like evolution of logos. And then the thing, honestly, the video game thing here was like super, super interesting for me. This is great, right? Because I am not a gamer at all, and I know very, very little, Japanese poster here, about video games. And so to see like the screenshots from these video games here is like, it's really, really cool for me. The Project A video game, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't even know that existed. Like I cannot emphasize enough how little I know about video games, especially what, there was a Protector video game. See, I'm like, I read this and I forgot and I'm rediscovering it. This is what happens when you're deliriously tired. So you get the point. Like, this is an enormous book. I'm on page like 51, right? And then we get into kind of like the later video game era stuff. But I'm not going to show you every single page in here, but you kind of get the point. Hell yeah. That's awesome. So so that's the booklet. The booklet is amazing. The booklet is included, I think, in this limited first run thing. And then we get to the, you know, the Kung Fu Bob artwork is on the case here with everything that's on here listed on the back. And the actual movie disc is not in here, I have to let you know, because I'm ripping it onto my computer right now. I'm multitasking because I'm going to do clips from the Blu-ray in this review. And I just didn't have any other time to rip those onto my computer, so I'm doing that right now. But the disc with the movie, like with the full, there's 2 cuts in the movie on here. There's the Hong Kong release and the international one. The disc with the Hong Kong cut, which has all the other bonus features on it, it really, everything is on the first disc except for the international cut. It looks like, it's like this kind of, with like a little bit of this kind of like moved up into it. So that's basically the artwork that's there. And then this is the second disc with the like the international cut of it. And then you have this other poster, which you can see here, which you can flip and reverse and make that the cover. And then you also have reproduction lobby cards here, which I will show you. And we are 10 minutes into this video, and we have not talked about any of the features on this Blu-ray yet. All right, here we go. The wheels are coming off of the vehicle as we drive. That's really cool. I confess I haven't actually looked at these yet. I've been so like bogged down in that's really cool, the Japanese stuff, in watching all of the material that's on the set, that I haven't even really gotten around to looking at the lobby cards. Hell yeah, Alan Tam. That's pretty awesome. It's from the opening scene. Is that nudity? Okay, yeah. Sorry, YouTube. Please don't please don't take our video down because there's a tiny, tiny bit of nudity in that lobby card. And there's Lola Forner. So I'm going to talk about the commentary tracks first. Like I said, there are 3 of those. Then I'm going to talk about the rest of the bonus material. And then I'm just going to give like 2 or 3 impressions upon revisiting this. And I'm going to do another video or 2 about this film because I had a lot of ideas while I was watching it, about, just kind of about Jackie's career and the context in his career and stuff like that. So the commentary tracks are by Frank Shang. You know I love Frank. Frank is awesome. I've interviewed Frank. I met Frank in person. We're like BFFs at this point, I think. I don't, Frank's in the comments. Don't dispel the myth that we're best friends now. And then Mike and Arna, you know, who are awesome. And I've interviewed Arna a couple times on the channel before. And they're both great, and I love their commentary tracks, and they have such great rapport with one another. And then Podcast on Fire Network, and let me get you the names of the actual people who I know. One of them is Kenneth, who I interact with quite a bit on social media. Kenneth Brorsson. So yeah, I think he's Swedish, and I don't. Yeah, Scandinavian languages. Yeah. So I apologize profusely for that. I really. I'm looking at that. I'm just like, I really have no idea how to pronounce that. And then Phil Gillen, who I think is English. And so they're from the Podcast on Fire Network, like I said. And so this is one of their first audio commentaries, if not their first. I don't know if this is their first or like one of the first that they've done, but they've been doing a few recently. So it's really cool to see that, to see them like moving from doing the podcast and like social media stuff and things like that into like working on the releases and stuff. So the Frank commentary is amazing. You know I love Frank, and Frank does such awesome work on these. One of the things that I never realized about this film, really watching it from my perspective as an American, is that this is really a co-starring film. I always kind of thought of it as like Alan Tam is Jackie's like sidekick. And watching this film in the past, I was kind of like, man, the sidekick gets like a lot of time in this movie. But listening to Frank's audio track, I realized that Alan Tam was like as famous as Jackie at the time, or almost as famous as Jackie at the time. Like Frank compares him to Michael Jackson, and he was just like huge at the time. And it really was like a co-starring film. And that really changes my perception of this movie and how I watch it and how I think about like the comedy routines that are happening and like the driving sequence when it's Lola Forner and Jackie and Alan Tam on like a road trip with like, you know, I think Alan Tam's song is playing at that point. And like, there's so much stuff in this movie that's actually there to appeal to Alan Tam fans and not to Jackie Chan fans. And that honestly really does fundamentally change the way I watch this movie. So it was really cool to learn that. I knew basically nothing about Alan Tam. I've seen him in other movies before, but I really didn't know that much about his career. Him and Eric Tsang are like really, really good friends going back for years. And I think it was Eric Tsang who originally brought him into this project. But he seems like, Alan Tam seems like a really nice person. Like he was singing to Jackie at his bedside after he injured his head on this film. And I was really intrigued. He's released over 100 albums. What the hell? Like his personal life is kind of crazy. He's got like a child with a mistress, but he's still happily married to his wife. And like I learned so much about Alan Tam, and it changed the way that I perceive him as a performer in this film, but also the dynamic between him and Jackie. And I learned so much from Frank. And Frank, I think maybe if I understood this correctly in his commentary track, flew to Atlantic City to see Alan Tam. That sounds really cool. I'm jealous. I want to fly to Atlantic City and see Alan Tam. I'm from New Jersey originally, if you didn't know, if you're new to this channel or whatever. So, I mean, it would just be like going home to see Alan Tam. The Chinese title also, Frank translates that, and he talks about, you know, it's very different than the English language title. And it, again, as with knowing more about Alan Tam and his fame at the time, understanding the Chinese title changes the way that I look at the movie. Because you see what the original intent was, right? And it's very different from like, oh, Asian Hawk, you know, Armor of God. It's like one of these Indiana Jones type adventure things. And like, but fundamentally speaking, I think when you know the Chinese title, the film is really about relationships. And that changes what you're looking at, because you're not looking at it as like action, action, action. You're looking at it as a film about these people. And then he talks about the losers and the winners. If you're familiar with the film, there's like a band called the Losers, and they're based on the Winners, which is a band that Alan Tam was actually in. Kenny B was in the band. Kenny B actually has a cameo in this movie, which is really cool. I've been seeing a fair number of Kenny B films recently and learning a lot about him. So that was really cool to see him in there. And, you know, just the success of this film, like the huge huge success of this film in Hong Kong and Japan, like around the world. It's really interesting to learn about that. And just, I knew this was a big hit, but I didn't realize how huge of a hit it was and how big of an event film it really was, coming when it did in Jackie's career and in Alan Tam's career. It was really fascinating to learn all about that. Why is Cynthia Rothrock not in this film? Because it has been long rumored that she was supposed to be in this film, and Frank confirms that she was in fact supposed to be in this film. Why is she not in this film? That's a really interesting story. The car chase in this movie was worked on by a French guy. He was like the car stunt coordinator who did like James Bond films and stuff like that. And Frank talks all about that. And then Frank gives an amazing account of Jackie Chan's injury, taken from a guy who I think was like a production supervisor on this film. And he was also a columnist. And see, he, at the time that this was happening, he was writing extensively about it. And so Frank talks about like why Jackie's account is one way and, you know, Willie Chan's account is a different way, and why this other guy's account is the way it is, and how they all kind of differ from one another or agree with one another. And it's really, really interesting to have that whole analysis there. So I'm not going to tell you every single thing that Frank says, because you should just go and buy this release and listen to the commentary track. Now, Mike and Arna. The first thing I need to say about the Mike and Arna commentary is that the best Japanese beer is Sapporo. Now, I know that Japan has you know, like microbreweries and stuff like that. But in terms of like the big behemoth beer companies in Japan, Sapporo is obviously number one. Now, Jackie has a Kirin in here, and Mike and Arna talk about their favorite Japanese beers. But I just needed to put that out there. And I want all of you to tell me in the comments, what is your go-to Japanese beer? Asahi is my least favorite. I would rather have a Kirin than an Asahi, but Sapporo is number one. And it's not even close. So I guess Mike has worked with Eric Chang before, and Arna has been on set with him maybe, or like knows him through other people or something, and they talk a lot about him and what he's like on set, and like his career and his aesthetic, and like what this movie would have been had he done it, how it would have been different, how you can tell what he shot that remains in the film, because most everything that he shot, Jackie got rid of and reconceptualized the film and redid, but some of his stuff is still in there. They talk about how you can tell. There's a really interesting section where they talk about rumored lost footage from other really famous Hong Kong films in talking about the lost footage from this film. So that was really, really cool. There were 14 cinematographers on this movie. I had no idea they talk about that. Mike makes a really interesting point that the legend of the Armor of God really doesn't ever come to anything in this film, which I had never thought about before, but he's like, no one ever puts it on, and like, yeah, like it's just kind of there as like a MacGuffin kind of thing. Arna kind of analyzes some of the horror elements in this film, which is interesting to me, because while I was watching it this time around, there were certain scenes where I was like, this is interesting. This kind of reminds me of like Black Magic type, like Shaw, creepy, supernatural horror vibe. Not like the really gory stuff, but the more ghost story, creepy type stuff. And Arna kind of goes through and analyzes different sections that are clearly kind of taking from horror tropes and you know, like kind of hallmarks of the horror genre. John Ladalski, who plays the bald-headed monk in this movie, Mike Leader knew him really well. His story is amazing. I had no idea. I knew nothing about that guy. He was in Vietnam, and then he studied with Dan Inosanto, Guru Dan Inosanto, who was a sparring partner of Bruce Lee, who introduced Bruce Lee to nunchucks. He's from the Philippines originally, and he actually lives in LA now. And fun fact, I study martial arts with one of his pupils. So that's my pseudo-direct lineage to Bruce Lee, is that my teacher's teacher is Dan Inosanto. So this guy studied with him, and then he went and he lived in the Chungking Mansions, which, you know, famous from the Wong Kar-wai film, and Mike later describes it as the most Isley Cantina of Hong Kong, the scum and villainy. And it's just really interesting stuff about his career and who he was as a human being that I think is really, really cool to learn. They talk about Rosamund Kwan, how they think she's super underrated as an actress, and Mike talks about how her English is really good, and he always kind of thought that she would be a breakout international star, and he was really surprised when that never ended up happening. And I think that's a pretty good breakdown of all the stuff that, I mean, they talk about so much because they know so much, and like Mike knows, like Mike will be watching the movie and be like, oh, that's that guy, like I worked on whatever movie with him, and like there's just so much knowledge, and like Arna's knowledge as a filmmaker, being able to break down the film and talk about the techniques that they're using. And like, I learned so much about the Hong Kong industry, but also just kind of about filmmaking in general when I watch their commentary tracks. And then the podcast on fire. So this is so well researched, this commentary track. Like they obviously took this assignment really seriously, and they read through like all the material they could find, like Jackie's autobiography, and they go through all of like the stories and the information through all the different parts of the movie. And I've kind of pulled one out here that I really thought was super cool, to kind of illustrate for you what kind of stuff you're going to get in this commentary. But I kind of liken listening to this commentary track as like watching the movie with your friend who knows everything, you know? So like there's always like a friend who about one specific subject or something, they know like everything, and they could just tell you everything. And it's like having an encyclopedia there, and it's super, super cool. That's kind of what this was like. And so they talk about the leopard. If you're familiar with this film, there's a scene where Jackie is walking down a hallway, Jackie and Alan Tam, and there's like a leopard that kind of like tries to get them. And do you like my leopard impression? I don't know. In my world, leopards only speak out of one side of their mouth. So they tell a whole story about how like the leopard was supposed to be in a different scene, and Jackie was supposed to do this with it, and he was getting along really well with the leopard, but then he accidentally pissed the leopard off, and he made an enemy of the leopard. It's like really interesting to learn, and I guess this is in Jackie's autobiography, and I've read, I think, the first 100 or so pages of Jackie's autobiography, Never Grow Up, and then I got so busy, and I haven't had a chance to finish it, unfortunately. So, but it was really, really cool to hear that story, and like while watching the film, to have that context and stuff like that. So those are the commentary tracks. Now, to talk about the other bonus material on here, we have Art of Action. So if you're unfamiliar, Art of Action is a YouTube series with Scott Adkins, who, you know, is like amazing martial artist and actor. He's in the Boyka movies, and he's in Triple Threat with Tony Jaa and Tiger Chen and Iko Uwais and Michael Jai White, and everyone else is in that film. And he's in, you know, like the Ninja 2, Close Encounter. Like he's in so many awesome, like those Jesse Johnson movies, Avengement, like Debt Collectors, which I think was kind of a hit on Netflix and stuff like that. So him and Matt Rutledge, they go through like footage from the film. This is 30 minutes long, and they break down like stunts, fights. Like Scott Adkins and Matt Rutledge, they talk about how, like, what it means to be a director, and why if Jackie's directing, he's maybe not doing every single stunt, but we know that Jackie can do the stunts, so it's not like a knock against him really. It's just like when you're multitasking like that, you don't want to risk serious injury, and especially on this film when he really did hurt himself. At some point you're like, it's not really worth me doing that while I have to direct this film. And that's really interesting to hear that from a filmmaker's perspective. They talk about Jackie and Sammo and how they're very different as directors, and how they direct fight scenes and how that's different from one another, and what their focus is as directors. And that I kind of never really thought about that before, and that was really, really interesting to hear. There's also stunts in this and little bits and pieces of scenes that they pick out that I never would have noticed. To give you an example of this, in the scene where he's fighting all those monks in like their kind of dining hall area, Jackie throws this like little dresser kind of thing at the monks, and it doesn't break apart. What they notice is that when it lands, it doesn't break apart, and it doesn't kind of bounce, or like it looks like an actual heavy piece of furniture. And he throws it at these stunt performers, and they're talking about how, like, probably what Jackie said was like, okay, I'm gonna throw this, like, you gotta run. If you don't run, it's gonna get you, and it's gonna hurt like hell. And like that's the kind of detail that I never would have noticed. Or there's like a scene where Jackie does like a somersault off of a fireplace onto the floor, and they talk about how like that looks really simple, but actually if you know, he's wearing a backpack, so that's like kind of padding, but like that's a hard concrete floor, and like that's a difficult stunt to pull off. Like stuff like that, that's just so cool. So then we have Celebrity Talk Show. This is amazing. This, for me, is like on par with like the Incredibly Strange Film Show episode that's on the Criterion Police Story release, or like that Japanese television behind the scenes thing that's on the Heart of Dragon 88 Films release. Those are like kind of my favorite Jackie Chan bonus features. This is up there now. This is a 58-minute interview with Jackie on a talk show, just talking about everything. I think this takes place in like maybe 1990 or like the early 90s, but he talks about Armour of God. He talks about his injury to his head. He talks about an injury to his pelvis. He talks about how he never really had surgery because how much time that would take out of his career to recover in physical therapy, and how also he's afraid of needles and he didn't want to have surgery. And he talks about, so like I said before at the beginning of this video, this film was really heavily influenced by Indiana Jones, right? And in this interview, he talks about how he watches Steven Spielberg movies in the 80s, And he said he felt like a kindergarten kid watching like this genius at work, because he's like, I could never do that. And he talks about like in Hollywood, in a Spielberg movie, in a big stunt sequence, they would use like a miniature, and then they would shoot this other shot over here, and then they would go to a studio and they would shoot this, and like they're using different cameras and different lenses, and everything is different. All this different stuff is happening, and then they piece it all together. All this stuff shot over months by different teams and different locations and stuff, and it makes this amazing coherent sequence that the audience never knows is shot like this. And he's like, I just can't do that. And like, and he talks about like Hong Kong filmmakers and how he, as a Hong Kong filmmaker, he loves art house films, he loves Spielberg and that kind of stuff, but how it's like, what can I do really well? What can I do that I know no one else can do? What am I the best at? And he's like, it's action, it's the stunts, it's the fighting. Like, he talks about how in the same way that he feels like a child watching the genius of Spielberg, maybe someone like Spielberg would feel like a child watching a Jackie Chan movie, thinking about making a martial arts film, being like, I could never do that in a million years. And that's really interesting to hear his perspective on that, and how deliberately, I mean, we know that Jackie very deliberately thinks about his career because he said that in interviews and stuff like that, but just to hear him explain it that way is so cool. He talks about Miracles, which is a film that I really love, that I think is super underrated, and one of like the long camera shots in that, and how like they had this crane that they couldn't get the cinematographer on, so they had to remote control the crane, and then they had to take the wall out of the set because the crane was too big, and then there, like, as the crane moves, there's furniture that's in the way, so they had to have like people on his stunt team like moving the furniture as the camera was moving, so that it's just really cool to hear him explaining like all this behind the scenes stuff. It's just an amazing bonus feature to be on there. So now we have Rise of the Phoenix. This is 21 minutes long, and this is a bonus feature with, and I'm gonna just read the name off of here because I don't want to get it wrong. Oh lordy lord, where did you go? Audio commentary, was Matt Rutledge, is it? It's like, here we go, Radek Sienski, and I'm probably really butchering the pronunciation of that, and I apologize. He's done another bonus feature. He's an editor, like a film editor, and he did another bonus feature on another Jackie release from 88 Films that I loved, and this is a really amazing bonus feature. He talks about, he breaks down the sequence in the film during which Jackie was injured, shot to shot. Like, how can you tell what was shot when and how you can tell how the editors kind of salvaged the scene by moving things around. And it's really fascinating. He also talks about the context of the film quite a bit, which I thought was really interesting. And something else I learned from this that I thought was really cool is that Jackie Chan's preferred aspect ratio is different from Eric Chang's, but because they're using Eric Chang's footage in the film, Jackie had to shoot in his non-preferred aspect ratio, and he talks about like cropping, you know, square images to wide and that kind of stuff that I think is really cool and fascinating. So that's a great bonus feature, and you should buy this and you should watch it. Locations, this is 6 minutes long, and it's just stills from the film with photos of the locations now. I am a location junkie, so this was like, I loved this. This was an amazing bonus feature for me. If you're really into locations and seeing like the real place IRL, then definitely check that out. There's a Jackie Chan on VHS. This is 8 minutes long, and this is kind of about like the Jackie VHS releases in the UK, talking about the artwork that's on the cassettes and which companies release them and their availability and stuff like that in the UK. There's a Jackie interview that's 4 minutes long. That's mostly just about his injury and kind of anecdotal, his kind of perception or perspective. And then Willie Chan, same thing, 4-minute interview talking about the injury and what it was like living through that and how that affected the movie and stuff like that. So Peter Chung is Jackie's interview. My brain is starting to break. It's 30 minutes long, this video. Peter Chung is Jackie's editor from 1975 until 1997. And he edited some stuff for Bruce Lee. He talks about how Bruce Lee was like a really nice guy, and he was really friendly to everyone, and then he died, and this editor was looking for work, and he met Jackie, and you know, working with Jackie. But the thing that I love the most about this interview, which has nothing to do with Jackie Chan, is he talks about working on Long Arm of the Law, which is a movie I really love, because he says that was the hardest job he ever had, because they shot tons of footage with a bunch of different cameras, with tons of different takes of all of these scenes, and nothing was like organized or categorized. He wasn't given any instructions. They just gave him all the footage. Yeah, so like, and if you've seen that movie, you know there's like Steadicam, and there's like, you know, locked off camera on tripod, and there's like all kinds of camera work going on. So to think of like, they may have shot like the Kowloon Walled City shootout. There's like a really long Steadicam shot in that scene. It's like, you know, maybe they shot that 100 different ways, and he had to pick, do I want the Steadicam? Do I want the static camera? Like, all, it's really interesting to think about that. I'm getting off topic, but I'm geeking out about that. So I'm just going to go over my notes here and see what else I have to talk to you about, because oh, did we make it through? Did we make it through? No. Okay, because we have to talk about the amazing thing that I had no idea what it was, and then I watched this and it blew my mind. It is a tribute video. Let me find it here. It's called High Upon High, The Armour of Funk. So this is a tribute video by I guess they're like a European, like, I don't know if they're like synth pop, or I don't really know that much about the band, but they filmed like an Armour of God tribute video, going to all the locations, doing actual, like, the people, like one of the guys in the band, it seems, is an actual martial artist, and there's like a behind the scenes bonus feature about this music video. They did wires and like pads, and they had actual martial artists like recreating scenes from the film to this music video. It's really, really amazing, and I loved it. I had no idea what to expect, and it was just like pure entertainment and amazing. And so if you get this and you're like, what is this? Watch it. It's really, really, really cool, and you have to check it out. And then there's a bunch of trailers on here too. And I will also say, I know that some people are really into the language tracks. There is the and this is a 2K remaster, I should say. Watching this film really reminded me of the Criterion Police Story release, because as I said on my review of that release, it really looks like an 80s movie would have looked in the 80s. Like, and this is a weird thing to say, but like with some of these remasters, and I'm not saying this about 88 or Eureka, but some like the studios and places like that, they'll change the look of a film to make it look more modern. And the example of this that I gave, well, it's really a counterexample. When the Lethal Weapon films came out on Blu-ray, people complained that they look too dark. I read about this a couple years ago. And they had to release a statement basically saying, like, that's what the movie actually looks like. You're used to seeing stuff on, like, these high-contrast TVs shot on digital or artificially brightened or whatever, but, like, movies are supposed to have shadows. And, like, there's, you know what I mean? Like, we shot this movie to look a certain way, influenced by film noir and stuff like that. So, and this movie really has that kind of, it doesn't feel artificially touched up or brightened or anything like that. It feels like watching an 80s movie as it was made in the 80s. But the scan here is really, really incredible. And I heard they had some trouble with the source material or with the scan or something like that, so that they got it to turn out. Like, I think that might be one of the reasons that the release was a little bit delayed, was trouble with source material. I don't know if that's true. That's kind of like a rumor I heard. But it really looks incredible on here. And so to talk about the audio tracks, there's like a hybrid track that combines English dub for when people are speaking in English with Cantonese for when people are speaking in Cantonese. I highly recommend checking that out. It has the original mono audio track. It has the original English dub. But the hybrid thing is really, really cool, and you should check that out. So, and then it has the trailers, like I said. So that is my epic, mega, 30-plus minute, holy hell, I can't believe I haven't collapsed while doing this video, Armour of God, 88 films. I can only hope that I did this incredibly epic and amazing set for this absolutely classic Jackie Chan film some kind of justice in this video. You are watching Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. My name is Will. I thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know in the comments what you think about this release, what upcoming releases you're super excited about. And that's about that, and we'll see you next time.